I must say, David, I'm digging your hat and overalls get-up. You look like a true gardener.
I am a true gardener. Others are fake gardeners growing things like vegetables and wheat. Lame, I say. I am gardening something more significant. Plot lines.
Plot lines? Really? Tell us how that works.
Gladly, my good friend. Are you having trouble thinking of plot lines for your stories? Do your narratives come across as artificial or contrived? Why not just let nature cultivate the perfect plot for your work with the plotline seeds?
Plotline seeds? How in the world does that work?
You put the plant into the dirt, then dip a little sugar, spice, and everything nice. It's a shredded copy of Charles Dickens' Great Expectations and some whale poop for fertilizer, and presto! The plotline plants begin to grow. Look at this one, for instance. This sturdy trunk hosts a revenge plot, where the protagonist is off to get the one who murdered her husband, but look at all these branching paths. In this one, she catches the bad guy, only to discover he was working for an even greater evil. In this one here, she doesn't catch the bad guy and learns about not continuing the cycle of revenge. And in this one, she catches the bad guy, but they immediately hit it off and form a dark and disturbing romance.
Ugh, these plotlines are getting progressively worse. You don't have to use them all, right?
Of course not. You pick the plotline branch you want and you could call it good and get to writing. Or clip it off and plant it again to continue that branching path.
Ooh, sounds cool. Let's clip off a twig from that first branch, with the finding out the bad guy was working for an even greater evil.
Sure, clipping off now. Let's plant it and see what grows. 1 month later. All right, horticulture takes some time, but the new plotline plant has grown, and this plot has 3 new branches. Count them up, 3. 1, she catches the greater evil, but makes a deal with him to spare her own life, forever living in debt. The second branch, she manipulates another separate evil to fight the first one, prompting the two to kill each other. And behind door number 3, she kills the greater evil, only to find he was working for another, even greater evil. Which one do you choose, Donald?
The third one, an even greater evil.
1 month later.
And the third branch of this new plant, she kills the even greater evil, only to find he was working for another, even greater evil.
Greater evil! Greater evil!
1 month later.
She kills the greater evil, only to find he was working for another, even greater!
Okay, alright. This story's getting real dumb. It's been 3 months now, and this story's something I could have come up with in like 5 minutes.
Well, I suppose they can't all be winners. Try the new plotline seeds for when you need nature's aid to form the perfect plot and have a lot of time to kill. Like a lot of time. Maybe we should sell a super seed growing device with it?
Super seed growing device? Now that's just ridiculous.
Welcome, fellow nerds, to another episode of The Ritwit, the show that's simultaneously the best and worst podcast about writting on the internet. It's sort of Schrodinger's podcast in that regard.
Isn't it just?
Well, I mean, when you open the trunk and realize it's there.
That smell. That rancid smell. Have you heard that joke? Schrodinger is driving his car, and then he gets pulled over because there's a weird smell coming from the back of his trunk.
Oh.
And
okay.
the police officer opens up the trunk, and then he says,
he
sees there's a dead cat in the trunk. And he's like, "Did you realize there's a dead cat in your trunk?" And then Schrodinger's like, "Well, I do now." I do.
Thanks for joining us, listeners. We apologize. We had a brief hiatus induced by the pandemic restrictions in our area. We're back. We're looking forward to bringing you some more content. We are in a new set, however.
Yes, we are, which means that we get to start with what will we rip off from this month.
So, why don't I let you go first, as I did last time?
Aren't you sweet?
I try. Sometimes I manage.
Sometimes you manage, but you're raised by an older brother, so you don't have that feminine sort of emotional sort of... Wow, I'm being really sexist here. I was trying to make it as a compliment to myself, and I just made it as an insult to
Backhanded compliments. You had 3 sisters.
I did. 3 wonderful sisters.
3 wonderful sisters. I
Well,
met them
one
all.
of them's not that great. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
That's a joke. I love
you
all
get
3.
the gossip on the Ritwit here, folks.
That's not true.
All right, what are you going to rip off from? Go ahead.
Guess what? I'm reading another book.
You know what? I
What?
think this is like the last one for your allowance, and wouldn't you be amazed that it's 2020 that you're doing that?
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't read books. You're right, because the end times have truly come upon us. Fire is raining from the sky. Dogs and cats are living together. Mass hysteria.
Well, some houses, I suppose that's true, but I mean, come on, you can't. You're a writer. Reading is like part and parcel of how you. Anyway.
Yeah, I know, but I did say in an episode that I forgot which one it was that
Ding.
that like if I read like
Too
3
many
books,
yeah.
then the end times would come. And guess what? The end times have
You've
come.
made it. Well, okay. Does it count?
Yeah, why?
Well, for more on that.
What do you mean?
Well, you didn't say what you were about to say.
Oh, well, I'm reading a book called The Clan of the Cave Bear, the first of a series called Earth's Children by author Jean M. Owl? Okay.
My grandfather actually recommended that series to me when he was still alive. That's how long ago I've heard about it.
Yeah,
And
it was
I
recommended.
actually do have a couple of the books at home.
Oh, nice.
We were looking through some stuff. I haven't found the first one, so I haven't started reading it yet.
Well, I got it on Audible. It was recommended to me by a friend of the show.
We're okay. You're only listening to it on Audible. You're not actually like taking a book and reading it.
Funny you should mention that. No. But it was recommended to me by a friend of the show, Amber. So that was good. But yeah, she said it was a good book, and so I started reading it. Listening to it, I guess. Yeah, it started. I think the first book came out in 1980. And then there were 6 books in the series, and the last one came out in like 2011. Like she really took her time between them.
Hey, George R.R. Martin. At least she finished.
Yeah, come on, George R. R. Martin. He's gonna die someday, and I'm gonna be like,
Well,
called
all
it.
of us will die someday. It's just a matter of when. Anyways, what do you think about Earth's Children or this particular book?
Well, before I think about it, let me just talk about what it's about. It takes place back in the Paleolithic era, when a young girl named Ayla gets separated from her clan by a natural disaster and is eventually found by another clan who are very different from her own people. There's vivid descriptions of the Ice Age wilderness and creatures, and the sheer amount of trauma the girl gets through in the first couple chapters is a bit harrowing. Like, it was hard for me to get through a little bit, but it made her recovery feel very earned and rewarding. But it's just really crazy stuff, the things she goes through. She doesn't eat for a while.
I mean, it's kind of bleak. It is the Ice Age.
Yeah, but like the pain of the lack of being able to eat hurts, and like she deals with some creatures like some cave bears.
It's worth mentioning. I'll mention this in my what will we rip off in just a little bit too. But there was a quote from an author in a book about how humans don't necessarily like winter. They just like having tools to fend it off.
That's true.
We say we like the winter, but we really like the fact we can gather around a fire, have hot cocoa.
We like
while
feeling
it's snowing outside.
We like feeling badass to fight the storm, right?
But in the medieval times, back in the Ice Age, they didn't have those tools.
Yes,
and so winter
medieval
was a
times
real
in the
struggle.
Ice Age, yes, but
there was a real struggle, and so well, the reason why it comes up, I'll get to in a sec. Sorry.
From the author of a book, like you so eloquently said.
End of my tangent. I'll discuss it more when I get to my part. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Anyways, but so what I'd like to rip off from it though is this particular style that All uses. There's very, very little dialogue. Most of it is just descriptions of emotions and facial expressions. And as someone who loves writing dialogue and funny banter, it'd be a real interesting challenge for me to write a story that has hardly any.
Sure.
Like,
I think honestly, you could also accomplish this by having only the one character, because I'm sure that Ayla goes through being alone for quite some time.
Oh yes, she does. And like, it's really a coming of age story too. She's 5 when she first gets separated, and it ends with her in her 20s, I think. So.
Wow.
So. But yeah, I bet I could make it work. Writing this without dialogue. Who knows? Only one way to find out, I suppose.
Bingo.
Man, so that's what I've ripped off. I need to stop reading books, I guess. So, otherwise, 2021 will be even worse than 2020.
Well, I suppose the pandemic won't be over. But anyway, I got a couple of different sources this time around. One is a classic of literature, literally quoted on the cover. Everyone who can read English should read it. I bet you haven't read this book, called Watership Down.
I've heard of this book. There was a movie based off of it that traumatized.
There's a Netflix series on right now, too.
Yeah, but there was the original cartoon movie traumatized kids the world over because they're like, oh, this is a cute tale about rabbits, right? No.
Not really. Anyway, the main
it is about rabbits.
It is about rabbits, but like it's not a cute little story about their, life. The main characters, similar to the Redwall series, I guess, are the woodland creatures. So apparently the author, Richard Adams, looked up some tome on Lapine culture, which informed his work on writing a cadre of rabbits.
Yes, indeed.
That's probably not the term for the group, but whatever.
Yeah, lagomorphs is there is probably a name for it, though. I'm not going to look it up because I don't even know.
No, group of rabbits.
Yeah, I know, canine, ursine.
A pack of... No, I'm not referring to that one. I'm referring to like a group of rabbits.
I actually think it's a herd.
It's not cadre. But anyway, moving on. I complained at length in an older version of Megazoic that the dinosaurs didn't technically need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas
older
this
version.
book, I said older version.
Yeah, I know, but just let you know, this current version, there is a reason.
I said an older version. Whereas this book, they do need to be rabbits because it's so intrinsic to their being. I'd love to go the reverse Donald here and try writing a story about animals, but make sure they have to be the fauna I select.
So the current version of Megazoic.
I have been inspired also by Adam's use of stories within the tale, something that I can't believe I've never really tried before.
What, like just telling stories within stories?
Right. So there's this rabbit deity, we'll call him, and every so often they'll have stories about his escapades that are literally being told to the rabbits gathered together while they're on their own adventure.
Yeah.
So it's really cool.
Several Bionicle books did that.
But I've never tried it before, so hey.
Yeah.
I've been also burning through some Power Rangers last month.
Of course.
When I wrote this note, it's no longer that month that I wrote the note. And one episode in the show, Operation Overdrive, caught my attention. In a place of the season where they lose their powers and try returning to their original lives.
Right.
It doesn't seem to thrill the same way. All of them independently realize that they need to return before even getting their powers back.
Right.
I'm already working on an idea, although it's merely the start, that explores the natural endpoint of people no longer having thrills like hero work. Where does that take people?
What happens to the Toa when they become Turaga?
Well, I mean, Toa and Turaga is a pretty set progression.
I just got Bionicle on the brain.
You do. More on that in a couple weeks, I suppose. I have no doubt at all it'll come up in a couple weeks. Again, I recently ran across a tweet through some other forum that I wanted to share also. Quote, "Everything about being a writer is summed up in this. Stuart Stern and was asked in the 90s by a writing class for a copy of his 1955 script for Rebel Without a Cause. He dug one out of the closet, opened it for a mere second, and began to cross out a line he felt he didn't need.
For this movie that had been out for nearly 50 years.
Always be editing your work. Unless you need to pass it off to the publisher, and then it's out of your hands."
Or if the movie's already made and edited and released and is a classic.
As I said, it's one of the things you should always be editing your work. When you hand it off to somebody else, it's done. It's gone. You let them take care of it. But when you come back to it, whenever.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, by that point, it's really just for yourself, though. But
well, you've hopefully improved in the interim.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so that is the segment we usually have before starting a new set.
Usually, I'd like to think always.
No. Well, when we first started it was pretty much always. But anyway.
I guess that's true.
We're moving on to a new set. This one, as you can tell from the title, is about types of endings.
Yes.
So.
Here's a type of ending. A period. English major joke.
Yep, the whole era is defined and ended. All right, so we're talking about the various types of endings and the categories of how they each resolve their respective stories.
Oh, yes.
This first episode, we are talking about mostly resolved endings.
Ooh, what could those be?
Ones that wrap up the main plot, but leave subtle hints for more to come.
Oh, that's what they are.
What are some ways you can write these little sequel hooks without detracting from the resolution of the current installment's plot?
Well, having things that don't really alter the main plot too much, just things that set up new plots. That's one way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The narrative you've set up should hopefully have tied up most, if not all, of its loose ends.
I mean, if you don't resolve enough, then it doesn't feel done.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can leave small things up in the air, of course, but anything much bigger, then it's more of a sequel hook. It's more than a sequel hook by that point. More like a small cliffhanger.
Sure.
But if you have a little thing unresolved or show a new development, you can make make it work without detracting from the current book's resolution. And I guess, to be fair, you can have bigger things unresolved as long as it's known that's the overarching goal of the story. But for this episode is over.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to answer the main question the story has and not have it be a cliffhanger ending, you know?
Right. And it's worth mentioning that we say mostly resolved endings. Obviously, some of these could yield actual sequels.
Yes, indeed. Hopefully.
But we do want to draw a line between this and a literal cliffhanger where you have to go on to the next one to see it resolve.
Right.
So, in my case, I believe that you can write this little hook in by giving it to a side character.
Oh, yeah.
If they aren't on the marquee of your poster, you don't need to resolve that plot per se.
The poster for the movie, yes.
Another thing is using these aspects of life that we forget about over the adventure, the household, the siblings, what have you. It doesn't rate as being major within your narrative, allowing you to dangle this without worrying if it's treated with proper resolution in your draft.
Right, exactly. But yeah, that's an interesting idea to give it to the side character. Like, just something like, oh, they have their own adventure, that could be coming up.
Well, and maybe it's not truly an adventure in the same way. It's more of a domestic problem, which is why I brought up household.
Oh, that old ball and chain. No.
So, on a scale of 1 being unintentional/subconscious to 10 forced and planned for, how strong is the need to add something that might expand the universe you're building? Also, please make some comment about the need to fulfill that extra idea you're putting in.
You can totally tell this is a question that you wrote.
Absolutely.
It's not like, what are the benefits of what are the detriments?
You want me to do different types of questions.
No, I'm just saying that's what I do. You do different types of questions. I try to be like, I need to come up with a really good question, something that's really focused, but also something that can really allow a lot of discussion. But then it's like, what are the benefits? What are the detriments?
Are you saying you're not very creative?
No. I mean, I'm creative in some areas, but I mean, I am a writer. I like to think I'm creative. Just not very smart sometimes. Well, it depends on how big the idea is. For if you introduce something too big at the end, you might just disappoint readers that nothing's going to come from it rather than excite them for what's to come.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd say probably like a 6 or a 7 and how strong the need is to add something that could expand the universe. But again, it depends on what type of kind of story you want to tell first,
Right.
I know I introduced a big development for the world at the end of my first Megazoic book. No spoilers here.
But go buy it on Amazon.com and find out.
But I left it just enough of it vague to keep it interesting and exciting. Like, oh, there's this big development. And it could mean a lot later, but for now, what it could mean is kind of more like, but...
Well, and also worth noting that you said it's the first book and you have 4, and they're all available, by the way.
Yes.
That, if you're already planning to do a sequel, but you want to resolve this adventure, it's a little different.
Yes.
Than if you're... Because, again, as you said, the type of story that you're trying to tell. If you know it's multi-part already going in, you can do a lot of that, and it becomes natural foreshadowing, whether you pay it off immediately or you pay it off later, right?
Right, and I guess to be fair, I was kind of envisioning this as mostly the first part or a part of a multi-episode series or something. But I guess this could work, and like there could be other stories that have this kind of unresolved ending in a sort of, and the adventure continues kind of way.
Well, and I was going to say another interpretation of mostly resolved endings means that you're only writing one, but you leave it open-ended that somebody else, if they wanted to, could take it further.
Fanfics, yeah.
Exactly.
Like, I can't believe this is an example that comes to my mind. I don't think... I've shown you parts of Road del Dorado, but I haven't shown you... you haven't seen the whole movie yet,
I have not watched the whole movie.
Okay, so it ends with they save the city of El Dorado by long story. They block off the entrance so that Cortez can't discover the city and raid it, And they in the process they sacrificed their boat to knock down the pillars, and the boat had all of their gold. And so they are left outside without a map, without a plan. But then Chell gets on the horse and like, come on, let's go. And they're like, but we don't have a map. We don't have a plan. She's like, well, that's what makes it interesting. And they just ride off to their horse.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen. That movie bombed, so there was never a sequel. But they were planning for there to be a franchise of them.
Well, and for what it's worth,
but
it
that
taps into the adventuresome spirit of explorers who did not have a map. They were tasked with finding out more, making the map.
right,
you know?
exactly. So that even though that was planned for it to be a series, that ending still works as a standalone.
Right. It doesn't demand enough of a sequel that they resolved it. They could let it be just as it was.
Right, exactly. So
I firmly believe on this made-up scale that this is your mileage may vary for different writers,
Right,
but
of
I
course.
find myself to be at a 7.
mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, I'm not ramming it into the story because I must put it there, but I'm pretty sure it's deliberate if I'm doing it.
Right.
Sometimes I like to throw in ideas better than my original anyway.
Oh, that works.
If it potentially adds depth to the story, could expand the universe and make it feel more authentic,
right.
such that there are other cultures, such that there are other things going on rather than just the people here. I want to be the proverbial monkey throwing stuff against the wall
Oh, good little monkey.
to see what sticks.
What are you throwing?
But
we
even
all
more,
know what you're
but
throwing.
even more than that, it's seeing whether the new idea sticks to the wall or not.
Yes.
And you know what? That's basically playing with house money in a casino relative to the main plot of your story.
Well,
right?
now I'm just picturing casinos throwing
out
out
chips against the wall.
monkey poop as their chips.
But even when I'm being less intentional, like I'm not expecting to move on to the next thing, banter tends to add concepts that can kind of weigh the scales a little differently. So I'm never below a 3 either. I think.
Banter is so useful, isn't it? It's so fun and it's so
It is.
useful.
It is a little too much fun. I have to admit, it's one of my guilty pleasures of writing.
It's just one of my pleasures.
Guilty because, unfortunately, it's not always moving the plot, even if
No.
it unintentionally does
But
sometimes.
it's a great garnish. So
And variety, spice of life.
Yes.
Hey, how big can the sequel hook be in scope while still making the main story feel resolved?
Well, it depends on the type of story, I suppose, but you can make it a lot bigger than you might initially think, so long as it doesn't detract from the resolution of the current installment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, take the first Avengers movie, another Bionicle, Marvel, Power Rangers. We're just calling out the
We just
the
check
greatest
off the
hits.
boxes.
I don't think the word tokusatsu has been said yet, but now it has. So
Thank you for saying it right. Anyways,
Well,
what about the first Avengers movie?
the heroes won, Loki was stopped, New York was saved, and the Avengers became a team. But the post-credit scene came along and gasp! Thanos was the mastermind of Loki's whole scheme and has taken great interest in Earth. That's a pretty huge sequel hook.
Well, yeah, it is.
But since it's only indirectly related to the main plot, it still remains a sequel hook and not a cliffhanger.
Sure.
So
I really, really hated how long it took them to actually pay off Thanos, though.
But didn't you say initially, though, that, like, they're going too big too fast? So they're like, okay, well, we're setting up something that's really big.
Right, and in the end, they set up something that was humongous, and they did a proper treatment of it. But at the time, I was looking, why are they going such a powerful villain that soon?
Well, that's why they took a while to build it up.
Was beyond my knowledge. Anyway,
But yeah, like, the point is, like, the hook can be as big or as little as you want, as long as it doesn't leave the main narrative hanging. Like if during the Battle of New York, they couldn't stop Loki, and then Thanos came walking out of a portal, and it's like, the Earth is mine! And then the movie ended. Like,
that'd be a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things. If you can't answer the main conflict,
mm-hmm.
then it's not really resolved, and you probably shouldn't be ending it yet.
Right.
For it to be this type of ending.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if you treat a book as asking a critical question, treat a story as asking a critical question, if that question does not have an answer, then it shouldn't be ending yet.
Right, yeah.
Especially for this kind of...
Unless for some of the real artsy ones, where they're like, the point of the question is that it's asked, not that it's answered.
The real journey is the friends we made along the way.
Yeah, that cliche.
My thought in reference to the question we asked is, where does the hook happen?
Oh, yes.
If it's falling action, maybe it needs to stay small, so it doesn't engender such a strong expectation in the readers that it will be paid off in future installments.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you don't have future installments.
That's always the risk.
Donald just referenced the post-credits scenes that are prevalent in Marvel films, but books don't really have stuff like that unless you tag an epilogue on, which for more on that potential, we have talked about epilogues before.
That's true.
And introduce a major twist.
So, like, for a book, the equivalent would be, after you have the end, then you have the, about the author, and then you have, like, the other books by this author, and then a little bit later, then you have a scene.
Which makes no sense, because you usually save the about the author thing for, like, the last actual page of a book, right?
Well, no, yeah, that's the thing. And also, you still have the blurb in the back of the book. So you have to write the post-credits scene after that.
As I said, books don't have that kind of benefit.
No, they don't.
Sure, you can leave a massive hook in the epilogue if you have one, but be fully prepared that the pitchforks and torches may come out if you just leave it sitting there. And
You
never
hear that,
address it
Martin?
again.
You hear that, George R.R.?
We have JRR, now we have GRR. It's great. What tipperoonies can you give about including stories that you don't plan to pay off in the same spine of your hypothetical published book?
Oh, yes, of course. It depends on if it's something you're planning to pay off in a future book or something that's just ambiguous forever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it's the former, make sure you don't have too many unfinished stories in the current book, and then you'll just annoy the reader, but have enough of them to keep the reader intrigued on where it's all going to go. Like, if it's the latter, they're going to be annoyed anyway, or at least I will be. Ambiguities for plebs. For more on that, please tune in next week. Okay.
Let it never be said we aren't having fun.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Man, oh man. We're having so much fun. I deleted some episodes of my other show, Paleobites, accidentally, and it's still driving me crazy. I'm going to record them again.
But
Anyways,
hey,
on that tangent.
But hey, maybe it'll be better the second time around.
Yeah, maybe.
And while we're at it, please go and check out Paleobites as well.
Yes. I did not mean that to be a cheap plug. I was just like me venting.
I'm turning it into one.
Oh,
you
well,
already
thank
mentioned it.
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank
It's
you
free. It's free. Easy for me to say. You don't pay a darn thing for. Would you not have your phone on vibrate?
All right.
Unprofessional. It's buzzing and loud enough to be heard on the recording.
All right. Whoop. Doot, doot, doot.
Anyways,
All right. There we go.
so go check out Paleobites. The stuff that he was trying to record is not going to be published for a while, but he's got an incredible backlog about a vast amount of prehistoric creatures.
I don't need
with several of his friends on there.
Yeah.
I'm not on like the official stuff, but go listen to it anyway.
because you're not a good enough friend. That's the reason.
It's
right?
because I'm not a good enough friend, and because I am terribly underqualified when talking about
That's
prehistoric
really the
creatures.
reason. Like, honestly, I'd have you on every episode if you were interested.
I'm glad you like having me around. Anyway, if you don't write this extension of a story, this little like thing you throw in there, someone else may feel free to think about it.
Fan fiction.
So long as your main character or your main cast is resolved enough. Some of the side characters don't necessarily end in a happy, hunky-dory place all the time, right?
Right.
I mean, that's life. It's not always going to end happily for everyone involved.
If only, though.
There can be an anvil in some thing's life that doesn't impact your story.
Ooh, like an anvil to the head.
Just hanging over there, and all of a sudden you see this magic hand of God cut the rope, and boom.
That sucks.
It sucks. But, the threat of something like that happening is not foreign to side characters, and if it's not important to your main cast, then you can have it.
I guess that's true.
I mean, because it doesn't impact your story, right?
No.
Even if the character is involved heavily, or maybe not so heavily, but if the character's there, we don't necessarily see that aspect if you don't address it as part of your main plot.
That's true.
So don't bend over backwards to resolve every little thing unless you feel it's important.
Right, because this is... Yeah, well, we'll get to the endings that have, everything resolved, but for now, like this one, it's less important, you should resolve a lot, but, maybe not everything, unless you want to.
And, hey, for what it's worth, you can choose how much to put in. And I think I quoted Orson Welles way back once upon a time about you choose where the ending is.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, we're ending this one for now.
Yeah, perfect segue. I completely forgot to do one this time because I was so mad at myself.
So that's it for this week. we will talk about other kinds of endings, but this one's mostly resolved, don't you think, Donald?
Mostly, but there's more episodes to come, so not quite.
We'll see what happens next. But thank you to all of our patrons so far. If you want more details on that, check out patreon.com/Matthew Donald.
Yes. You can contact us at mattd@matthewdonaldcareer.com for any general questions to either co-host.
Hey, we share Matt D, so David Donald would be appreciated if you're going to pick one of us to speak to.
And please, if you like the show, rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
Or wherever you're listening to us, we thank you for your support.
Of course.
And hey,
yeah.
if you've got ideas for stuff you want us to talk about, let us know. Also, if it's okay to share your stuff on the air.
Yes, indeed. If you want to follow me personally, you can follow me at Matthew Donald Career on Facebook, at Matthew Donald64 on Twitter, and Matthew Donald64 on Instagram. Why 64? Because that's how many times I've been dumped. You'd think I'd be ashamed of this.
Wow, that's
but
a lot.
I say I should wear this like a badge of honor. I've been dumped.
Singles Awareness Day forever.
I've been dumped by a girl 64 times, David. That's an honor few could ever know.
That depends. Do you have a long enough relationship to have it count as a dump? Because for any of you who do, not that I recommend this, but one night stands, it's not like you're getting really dumped by a person, right?
If we're together for a month, that's 64 months, which is 5 years and 4 months.
Yeesh. It's a lot.
Yeah. It's an honor few could ever know. Honor to be dumped by so many girls. Why, David? Why don't people love me?
There, Donald. Don't worry about it. You're okay. There.
Where?
You'll have to find that one on your own.
Oh, man.
Anyways, thanks for listening to two twits talk themselves out about types of endings on the Ritwit. I'm Matt David.
I'm Matt Donald.
We'll see you next week with a different type of ending.
Indeed.
Until then, keep writting.
Keep writting, and that's the end.
And keep washing your hands.
Oh,
Stay
yeah.
safe,
It's not
masks,
quite
and all
the
that
end.
stuff.
Yes, wash, wear,
all that stuff. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Pandemics suck.
The